Okay, wonderful. Well, I am so pleased and excited to have Rhonda presenting today in our webinar on the QuickBooks review, mostly because I don't know anything about the QuickBooks, and I'm very excited to learn more features about it. So, Rhonda, welcome. Welcome to our group today.
Thank you.
So I actually did the write-up for Rhonda for today's webinar that talks a little bit about why use QuickBooks versus not use QuickBooks, and to learn a little bit about the setup, how you do that on a daily basis. And we were just talking a little bit yesterday about why people do use QuickBooks and why they don't. And what I've found is a couple of things. People are familiar with it. They've worked with it before. A couple other reasons are they have an accountant that says, you know what, I'll do your books, but I really want you to use QuickBooks because you can email it to me or export it to me, and I'm more comfortable with it. A lot of people use it because it is not a closed system like MaxxTraxx. And you guys, I'm sure a lot of you on the call have been MotorTraxx users before. It's a closed system, so everything is going to require double entry, whereas you have a little more flexibility with QuickBooks. You can edit things and not really leave a paper trail, which is some of the reasons why I'm more of a pro integrated accounting person rather than the exporting to QuickBooks. And we were talking about this yesterday, Rhonda, it exports and it goes one way.
Right.
So that's a little, tell us a little bit about how that works, the one way of the whole QuickBooks.
Well, with the one-way exporting, basically it's, all of your data is put into MaxxTraxx, and you're exporting basically a journal entry into QuickBooks to update your general ledger. However, any entries you put into QuickBooks separately, you can't import that back into MaxxTraxx.
Okay.
So if you put any bills or vendor invoices on the QuickBooks side instead of on the MaxxTraxx side, you're going to end up double entering backwards because it won't export the other direction.
Okay. Okay. Good point. Well, you want to take it away and kind of give us a little bit of education on the setup on both ends. Again, like I said, guys, I didn't know much about working with QuickBooks. I'm sure most of the people on the call have a better idea about working with it than I do. However, I do have to write or record a training video, so I'm hoping to learn a lot on this webinar today to be able to be confident enough to do a training video. And of course, we'll have that loaded under our training video library on our website if you guys want to reference that. So we'll talk a little bit more about formalizing the setup process and how to do the export. So take it away, Rhonda. Show us how you do our setup.
All right. Well, the first thing that we have to do, basically the whole setup, the details of the whole setup are getting your general ledger account numbers in MaxxTraxx to match whatever you're using in QuickBooks. And you can either set the MaxxTraxx to match your QuickBooks if you've been using QuickBooks numbers and you don't want to change your QuickBooks numbers, or vice versa. If you don't really care what the numbers are or maybe aren't even using numbers on the QuickBooks side, then we have to match them up with what MaxxTraxx is currently using.
Okay.
The purpose of that is when you close out at the end of the day and you create that export, it's literally just a journal entry. So if we don't have account numbers matching, when it drops that journal entry into QuickBooks, it just kind of goes nowhere. It doesn't know where to post to, or it'll create a blank account rather than posting to the account you're wanting it to import into. So in that setup, the first thing we have to do is in MaxxTraxx, we have to go up to the toolbar and go under Setups into Company Information. And down where halfway down the screen it says Accounting Export Setup, we simply have to tell it that we are going to be using QuickBooks accounting rather than MaxxTraxx or no accounting at all. And that just kind of helps the system know as you're posting things that you're going to be exporting at some time.
Okay.
The next thing
Rhonda,
would be,
do you have to have that checked to QuickBooks if you want to export?
I don't believe you have to, because I obviously I didn't have it checked, and I could still create the export utility. But I think I'm not exactly sure if behind the scenes it has anything to do with anything other than information for you or anybody going into your company setup to realize that you're using QuickBooks and not the in-house accounting.
Thank you.
Because whether you're exporting to QuickBooks or not, everything is posting to your in-house accounting. So even if you're not using the accounting, you're creating a general ledger in MaxxTraxx with every transaction you close out anyway. So it's just probably just a note for anybody that lets you know which accounting package you're literally using.
Okay.
Okay, so with the setups there in MaxxTraxx, we're told that we're using QuickBooks. We have to then go under, on the toolbar, we're going to go to Setups again. We're going to go down to Accounting and Payroll, and then down to our default account postings. And these are the accounts, not including payroll, just the top 6 here, are the only accounts, or I'm sorry, 5, that export to QuickBooks. So you don't have to set your entire chart of accounts with all of your expenses and all your other accounts that you're using, just the ones that we're exporting to. So as we go through each one of these, we'll see that most of them have a preset number in here based on the accounting in MaxxTraxx, which are the numbers that I'm going to use just to make it easier for today. So we have a list. You can actually print this out, or you can just do them here as you're toggling back and forth. The setup doesn't really take very long, but it's up to you, whichever is easier. If you want to print them out and then just be working in QuickBooks alone or toggling back and forth. So I'm going to go with the back and forth. First, we'll start with the receivables, accounts receivable. In MaxxTraxx, it's currently saying that our default setting is that all of our accounts receivable are posting to the 12,000 account. We would then basically go to our QuickBooks sample. And actually, if we back up a step here, we'll notice that there are no account numbers being used in the chart of accounts in QuickBooks. And you have to have the chart of account numbers turned on. Otherwise, it won't work. So we're going to go up in the toolbar on the QuickBooks side. We're going to choose Edit, go down to Preferences. All the way at the top under Accounting, under Company Preferences, we're simply going to click the box to say Use Account Numbers. And as you'll see, old school QuickBooks only ever gave it 4-digit numbers. And also, any accounts that were added after, before the account numbers were even turned on, don't have account numbers at all. So depending on what we're exporting to, we'll determine what changes need to be made. So for here, we have accounts receivable as the 1200 account. And this is what I was saying before. If we have account numbers in QuickBooks already that say we want to use, or our accountant says here, these are the numbers we're using, then you would go into MaxxTraxx and edit those to make a match here.
The numbers there, and then
Right.
we don't have to actually change them in the default account posting. Do we just have to do it on the chart of accounts, and then the default account posting will automatically know instead of 12,000, it'll be 1,200?
Well, in MaxxTraxx right now, they're already preset to these numbers. So
Okay.
just for the sake of time, we're going to tell our QuickBooks that we want the QuickBooks account numbers to match our MaxxTraxx numbers.
Mm-hmm. So if we
have-
how many people on the call right now have 4 digits versus 5-digit account numbers in your QuickBooks? Little feedback. Are you guys? Because I think Rhonda, you said in 2007 they were using 4 digits, but you're now using QuickBooks 2010, which uses 5-digit account numbers by default now, right?
Well, technically, you can create your account numbers to be whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
As many digits or as less digits as you want. But if you were creating a brand new chart of accounts in QuickBooks, starting up a brand new company and saying, hey, just create my chart of accounts for me, the old system would create them as a 4-digit number. The new system, 2010, creates them as a 5-digit system, which is kind of what MaxxTraxx uses, the 5 digits.
Okay.
2007 Pro creates 5 digits.
Okay.
Okay.
So it was probably from, because I was on 2007, upgraded to 2010, so probably some point of 07 and up is where they changed their numbering, which isn't a big deal as long as whatever you're using matches in both programs.
Okay. You don't mind me stopping and interrupting you along the way, do you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Okay, so in MaxxTraxx we have accounts receivable going to $12,000. So we're simply going to edit our chart of accounts in QuickBooks by right-clicking and going to Edit Account and simply changing the number to match. The account name doesn't matter. You can make it match, letter for letter, or if it doesn't match at all, it doesn't really matter. The only thing it's looking at really is the account numbers. So we've got accounts receivable. And throughout the setup, we're literally just going back and forth. What's our next one? Accounts receivable finance charges. We go back to QuickBooks, and we look to see if we have an income account for finance charges already, which we don't. So in QuickBooks, we'll have to either create it, or if you don't create it, if you forget or something, and we were to say export right now without creating that, it would actually create it for you because it would see in QuickBooks that you don't have a 47500, so it'll just make it. So
that would actually be the faster way to do it, wouldn't it be? Just to not create it and let it create it by itself?
You could either create them, because there's probably not too many, if you've been using QuickBooks for a while, because that sample company doesn't have really much in it. You can either create them now while you're setting them up, or you could go through and just match up the ones that you know you have an account for, and then your first export would create any of those miscellaneous accounts if you didn't want to take the time to create them yourself.
Okay, perfect.
So Rhonda, in your QuickBooks, you had an account 1200, and you do your first export out of MaxxTraxx, it's going to create a 12,000 that's a different account, right?
Exactly.
So you'd have a 1200 account and a 12,000. So that's where you'd have to be careful.
Right.
Okay.
So if you were a brand new QuickBooks user with nothing in it, it wouldn't really make a difference outside of you then having to go and make that other account that you're not using inactive. But if we've been using QuickBooks and we have a receivables account that we're using, we want to make sure that we set MaxxTraxx to import our receivables into that account in order to keep them all straightened out.
Perfect.
Okay. So
go ahead.
So if you're starting from scratch like we are, we're going to have a totally new QuickBooks software. It's going to be relatively easy for us since we're not trying to connect the two after we've been using QuickBooks for a while.
Yeah, pretty much. When you set up QuickBooks as a brand new user, it will, during the setup interview, it kind of asks you, like what kind of shop or, what kind of business do you have, so it can determine a generic type of chart of accounts for you. And then you still have to kind of tell it that you want account numbers turned on. So the numbering system is fairly close. Assets are always start with a 1, liabilities start with a 2. The numbering system will pretty much be the same, but what will end up happening is, like, you'll probably get an accounts receivable account in your defaults, but the other accounts that MaxxTraxx use for, overs and shorts or cost of goods sold and discounts, those accounts probably won't come. So you'll end up having to manually create those, or you can try to export one time with, after using MaxxTraxx for, a week or two, just do a manual export, which you can always delete the journal entry after the fact, but it will then create those account numbers for you. You can kind of see how that works.
Rhonda, does it create? I'm sorry. Does it create an account number if you have no amount of money in that account?
No.
If it's a 0? Okay.
Yeah. No.
That was my question.
Yeah, that would be the other problem.
We used to have, which I can probably locate and have Mark put back on the website as a download for anybody setting up QuickBooks first time. We actually have a chart of accounts that matches the existing chart of accounts in MaxxTraxx that you can import. So it'll just create the chart of accounts, and all the numbering is identical to what the defaults are.
Okay.
Does it wipe out the old stuff? Does it? So if Mark has a download for us to copy perfectly from MaxxTraxx, the same thing in QuickBooks, does it wipe out any other ones? So it's only the chart of accounts that matches MaxxTraxx exactly?
It would basically replace the entire chart of account file.
Okay.
It's just kind of a new IIF file, and it doesn't mix and match and drop in between. It just replaces, here's my new chart of accounts, starting from scratch.
You need an external program to do that, and it's really cumbersome. I looked into that.
Actually, it's not.
If you want to merge two companies.
Yeah, merging is more difficult. So that's why when we make sure that it's somebody who's not using QuickBooks, doesn't have any data in it, doesn't mind that we're replacing their chart of accounts because it will come over blank. So it's got to be for a brand new user.
Okay, so for my case, where I'm going to be a brand new user, something will be useful for me.
Yes, it will create this screen of your chart of accounts to match exactly what we have in MaxxTraxx. All these account numbers already preset for you.
Okay.
We'll look into that, guys, and in the follow-up email that we send after each one of these webinars, we'll see if that's something that we can develop and if that's something we can get put into the program or have an extra download that you guys can use. We'll, of course, then as soon as that's available and on the website, then we'll go ahead and copy you guys all and send you out another email, let you know it's available so it's there to download. Good questions.
Yeah, it was there before when we had the first version of MaxxTraxx that didn't have accounting in it. We purposely, because we knew that people were going to have to use QuickBooks at the time, we made it easier for them to set it up. But now we've got the integrated. It just depends on, whether you're currently using or new. Okay, so let's go back to, and we probably won't set up each one of these, all of them, but I'll go through and that, create some of the new ones, and then we'll do an export and see what happens, whether it's importing into those accounts we've set or whether it creates new accounts if we missed any, things like that. So just on this AR finance charges, I'm going to go into QuickBooks real quick and just simply create that account because I don't have one. I don't have that income account set up. So we're just going to go to QuickBooks, account, create a new one, choose income, and what was my number? 47,500. Go back. 47,500. And it was called Income Finance Charges. And that's pretty much that. So you would kind of go through your entire list and do the same thing, either edit your existing numbers to match or add in any ones that aren't there. And pretty much, even though you, like Walter was saying before, some of these accounts don't get posted to, but you would want to make sure that you're, if you don't do discounts, period, which obviously doesn't happen, but you would still want to match these up no matter what. You would want to create something in QuickBooks so that they match for the just in case, so that you don't have later down the road all of a sudden this miscellaneous, hey, where'd that posting come from?
Right.
A miscellaneous account hanging out there with a number. So your goal is to match everything from cash and systems, from the RO sales and cost of goods sold, cash payouts, miscellaneous cash incomes, which of course these you can add to the list. You can add more to the drop-down, and then also accounts payable for the vendor invoices.
So I do have
see.
one other question, Rhonda, on the RO sales and cost of goods sold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is it on that one? No, go up to the cash and system accounts. See where it says, where's the 12,000 account, AR charges and deposits. You know how you can go into a customer record and you have the ability to use a special account?
Mm-hmm.
So I could say anything, let's say for my fleet accounts, I want to count my, I want to track my accounts receivable for any fleet company in a separate AR accounts receivable. If I did it like a 12,100 and I went into my 5 fleet customers and I said, any charges for these fleet customers I want to send to 12,100. That's obviously not a default. Is that going to be directed, will that transfer into QuickBooks?
That's a good question. I'd probably have to check on that because I don't see that there's a setting to add. Okay. So it's assuming all AR is going to one account, but you're correct. In MaxxTraxx accounting, obviously, it's going to work. It's going to let you post to whatever account you want. But for this purpose of exporting, it doesn't seem to be a setup to have it export to more than one account. It's almost as if it's going to tell you to export to one account, and then on the QuickBooks side, you'd have to manually separate it out, which would be a pain.
Yeah, I could see. Okay, that's Chick one side, one from my side of the team. So if I am, so only the stuff that's in this automatic transaction posting defaults window, is this the only stuff that actually is included in the QuickBooks export?
Yes.
Or is it any transactions that happen during the day?
It's supposed to be only these settings.
Okay.
Like if all of these settings are pretty much tied to your cash drawer and your service counter, parts counter, and restocking of invoices. So if you were to do even a journal entry or a manual credit in AR or AP, those would all still follow under that same setting. If you went in from MaxxTraxx and, say, wrote a check, even though you're not using that checking system, or created some sort of outside journal entry, not realizing that you're not using the MaxxTraxx accounting anyway, those transactions stay in MaxxTraxx. They wouldn't export.
Okay.
But we'll have to come back. We'll have to ask that question about that. If they're tracking two different AR accounts, how does it export? How would we get it to export anyway to QuickBooks using both of those accounts or multiple accounts?
Okay, I'll take it offline, and then we'll answer that in our follow-up email. Perfect, thanks.
Okay, so the other setups that you have to, after you were to match all of these up to your accounts in QuickBooks, the other place you have to set is also on the menu bar under Setups, Accounting and Payroll. This one is under Product Codes. We've got 5 different settings here, and each one has its own asset, income, and cost of goods sold account, because you notice under the other default screen it didn't show, even under the RO and cost of goods sold section, it didn't have any of that. It only showed the discount portions. So we have to still go into all of our multiple product codes and do the same thing and match those account numbers up to whatever we're using in QuickBooks. And as you can see, these are all preset according to what we have in MaxxTraxx.
So if we track our tires under 13,100 and we track our, maybe in Derek's case, if we track fuel coming in and going out as a part, let's say we track that under 13,200 and have our own, 40,200 and 50,200 or 300, whatever I said. Right. Those, as long as we're putting a separate product code to each one of these, the system knows to take anything with a product code and export that over into QuickBooks on a daily basis?
Right. The product code is pretty much everything, whether you set up a product code or not. If we take QuickBooks out of the picture for just a second, we have to set up our product codes for accounting anyway. Otherwise, or when the system, when you first set up MaxxTraxx, it just defaults to what your standard inventory, parts income, cost of goods sold for parts. It's defaulting those, so when you close out a repair order, it knows to then move the dollar amount from the assets over to cost of goods sold and, the difference into your income account. That's all a part of your standard accounting. So when we're exporting to QuickBooks, when you're closing out your repair orders, it's creating that journal entry for you already. And now that we've matched all of our other accounts, all of our other default account postings to what our numbers are in QuickBooks, we have to do the same as well in product codes. Otherwise, they will default and go to whatever numbers are already preset, because they will, most of the time, it will, like for general inventory, that comes preset, but tires was added in, and it's going to a separate income account. So when it exports to QuickBooks, you'll have an amount in your general inventory, and you'll also, if you sold tires that day, have an amount in the 42,200 account. It will break it out for you that way. It's
and
kind
if
of the same.
If we didn't have a matching, if we didn't have the 42,200 in QuickBooks, would it create its own account?
It's going to do the same thing. Anything that it can't find to post, it will just create.
Okay, perfect.
So once we have the product codes all set under all of them because you'll have parts and labors, sublet labors, add-on charges. All of those will be preset so that it knows which account to send. And we will then assume, we've done a day's worth of work. We're going to, you can either go through, oops, excuse me, back up. We can either go through the process of closing out our, our daily sales and run our reports, which doesn't have anything really to do with the export outside of you're going to get your reports up for the moment. But if we skipped, you can balance your drawer and do all of that, and you have the option on the next screen to go to the export to accounting. Or if we don't even do the daily closing and we just simply click on the menu bar under accounting and go to export to QuickBooks, it's technically the same thing. It's going to, according to your date range, give you a list of all of your invoices you've closed, any vendor invoices. I don't have any on the list here, but your restock inventory so that it can post to your accounts payable in QuickBooks as well. And you have the option to say, I don't want to export my vendor invoices. I only want to export the front half customer side, and I'll manually do my vendor invoices by hand. That's the way it used to be in the beginning when we first started with the exporting. It didn't used to export, so then it was a double entry. You had to stock your parts in MaxxTraxx and then manually enter the vendor invoice a second time in QuickBooks. But now we actually have the option to export those as well. So the only manual AP that you're putting in QuickBooks are your other bills, lights and gas, rent, whatever, anything besides restock. Those will actually come over for you.
Wow. Okay.
In the export, you also have the option to, you can have it come over as just one big journal entry for the day. Or if it's not, if this box is not checked, then it will come over invoice by invoice by invoice. So you would have all of these as, one journal entry line separately. So that's totally up to you on how much detail you want in QuickBooks or not.
So if we did half, let's say we do half of them and we'll export them individually, and then the other half, can we export as a single QuickBooks transaction just to see the difference?
Sure.
Okay, and then does it know, Rhonda, by transaction number, you've already exported transaction number 243. Does it know not to ever do it again?
Once you do the export, it comes off the list. If for some reason you, let's say I exported and it was a mistake, I needed to back it out, you can delete the journal entry in QuickBooks. And if it comes over as a lump sum, it's one journal entry. If you're doing them single one at a time, you would have to obviously go back and delete multiple ones if you're wanting to erase the whole transaction that you just did. And then when we come back here to say re-export it, now that I've made my changes and I'm good to go, and I want to export them again, then you would choose this box at the top where it says Show Items Previously Exported, and anything that has been exported before would show back up on the list for you to reselect if you needed to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Now let's see if I change my date back. Yeah, see, I've got stuff here that I've actually no, these were not exported before, but it'll whatever your date range is, it's going to show you anything and everything that you have not exported. And if it's something like, say, you've already manually put in some of the entries into QuickBooks, you don't have to export anything you don't want to export. So you're not having to double up on your entries. You can just focus on, okay, all of these 2009 transactions, I've already manually put them in because I was doing it the old way. Now, as of today, I'm only going to be worrying about my new entries to export.
So, Rhonda, if there's some entries in here that you manually did in QuickBooks and you don't want to see them anymore in this dialog box, so over time, maybe maybe over a year, you've got 40 of them in here that you manually did in QuickBooks. Can you make them go away in here?
What you would actually do is you would tag them all. You would choose to export them because the export doesn't literally drop it into QuickBooks immediately. It's actually just creating an IIF file or a notepad file. It's creating your journal entry. So you can export them to clear this list, and just never import them into QuickBooks.
Got it. Okay.
Oh, good one.
Okay.
Okay.
You also have your option here to select a date. So even though I'm going to do an export and I'm looking at all my transactions for the month of June, I want it to, oh no, I'm sorry, I was thinking it was going to let you post a different, instead of rather than posting to today's date, but that's actually just a different date format on how you want it to.
Oh, depending on what your system, in case you had a Y2K, pre-Y2K program. Okay.
Right. Okay, so let's assume our setups are all good to go.
Okay.
And we've come in here and we're only going to export a few of them. And we'll have it set to bring them in one by one. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we'll select export. It basically just takes them off the screen. Nothing fancy happens. It doesn't take you to another screen or no pop-ups. We just know we're done at this point. So we cancel out of here. We'll minimize MaxxTraxx and we'll go back to QuickBooks. From here, you have to then, on the toolbar, click on File, go down to Utilities, choose Import. It is an IIF file. It's going to bring you to look for the file. Once you kind of find the file the first time, it'll automatically take you back to the same window. So this port right here, you'll only have to do once. But we're going to go and search the C drive, find our Scott Systems folder and our MaxxTraxx folder. And the exports all go into a folder called Export.
Okay.
When we open it up, it kind of gives you this definition. It'll basically just give you a batch number, the ending date of that batch. So if you were to do this multiple times, it would just create another one. It would give a different batch number, but you would see the dates would be the same, and you can look to see which one you want to import. I have one from January that I may or may have not ever imported, but you can always delete these from the list after you're done. You don't have to save them. You can always recreate them. It's just a note file. So
and it gives you the time, so you know what time, so you can tell which one, if you have a bunch for June 30th, right?
Right.
It's the 11:37, 25 seconds. That must, yeah, okay. Great.
Right, so this one, I'm simply going to choose to open it. Says my data was imported. And if we look to see what did it do to my chart of accounts, it did. Oh,
your
there we go.
Your list moved, so it must have. Yeah, I could see the whole chart of accounts. It expanded right when you hit that, so it did create a bunch of new accounts.
Right. So what it did was it looked at. It saw that I had a 13,000 account, and if I double click on it, it shows. Oh no, these are. Not sure why I'm in 2013. It created these accounts that I didn't have because in my journal entry, which let me go back to this screen real quick to view the IIF file. What it created was, I can open this with Notepad to look at it. It creates this big journal entry. So it tells me that in my 23,600 account, which is my sales tax account, I've got a dollar amount here, 41, 19, all of these accounts per transaction, per repair order, had its own little breakdown of each RO. So, and that's how it kind of calculates what's being brought in to, like if I were to print this out on a piece of paper and then I would have had to have manually gone into QuickBooks and done a journal entry posting these separate amounts to each one of these accounts in order to update my numbers.
Wow. Okay. Time saver.
So it creates the journal entry for you, and as you can see, I can import this one. I can go back. That's the reason why this is the reason why I was saying that after you've done an import, you probably might want to delete it out of your list because there's nothing stopping you from importing it more than once.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then what it's doing is it's showing, each time I've imported, it just created an entirely new transaction, which of course I can always delete it and say, oops, I didn't mean to import
This
those.
is before you import it. You have the option in the screen real quick to delete it here? Or are you actually in the account? Did you go right into the account?
I went into the account.
Oh, you went into the account. Okay.
Yeah. In QuickBooks, you have, that's a little bit of the freedom we were talking about in QuickBooks, where you could actually just go in and delete this entry, and it would delete the entire journal entry that it came with. Like if I look at the detail of that journal entry, it's got the entire breakdown of that particular repair order. And if I delete just this one out of just this one of account, it deletes it out of all, it deletes the entire journal entry from all sides.
Okay.
So that whole IIF file is gone, or just the invoice that particular transaction was attached to?
Just that one. Because we imported them in with 6 different entries,
Right.
it only deleted the one of the 6.
Okay.
And then if I delete the next line, it would be number 2 of the 6. So I would have to manually go through and delete multiple ones if there was a correction that I needed to make, or if I wanted to reverse out that entire import. I'd have to go through all 6 entries dated June 30th and delete them out of my QuickBooks in order to re-import them again.
So if you double it in on accident, there's no way of reversing that whole transaction in one fell swoop?
There
You've
is
actually
not.
got to, okay. So you don't want to ever double it in.
Yeah. If you're importing it, which we're going to do next, as one lump sum transaction, then it's not a big deal. You've only ever going to have one journal entry a day to worry about.
Okay.
But if you're entering them in by detail, then yeah, if you make a mistake, then that's a lot of backing out to do.
Okay.
But what we'll see ended up happening was when we did that import, it dropped some of the numbers. Oh, I didn't have any accounts receivable charges, so I didn't update my 12,000. Everything I had was cash. But as you can see, we have in QuickBooks, we already had an undeposited funds account, which is normally where all of your money flows into in MaxxTraxx. But because the number that QuickBooks was using was 1,400, and the number that we have set in MaxxTraxx is 11,000, it created its own account. It didn't know. And so now I've got 2 undeposited funds account, and that I don't want. I want to have it all coming into one account so I can do my bank deposits easier. So that's kind of the reason why we have to make sure we're adding them up. Now, see, if we had no accounts at all and it just created these accounts for us, great, fine. Then all I have to do is edit it and give it a name, and it actually, it gave it an account name of 11,000. It didn't even give it a number because it didn't know what to do.
Okay. So would you just general journal, maybe take everything out of, what was it, 1,400, take it out of that one and delete that or inactivate that account? Is that what you would do?
What I would do, since it was my first import, what I would do is go into each one of these, delete that entire import that I just did, which is only 6 entries. I would delete all of them. And I would go back and correct all of my numbers and get them to match the way they're supposed to and import it again.
Okay.
Because it's too, it would make, the thing is this has happened once, and even if I went through and did journal entries and moved my numbers around and made some accounts inactive, the next time I go to import, because my numbers are still incorrect or not matching up or whatever, it's going to do it again.
But if, let's say, we deleted the 1,400 and just left the 11,000, it would know then next time?
Yes,
it
would.
Use, okay.
It would, but it would have, for anybody who's doing the setup first, it would have been easier to just from jump edit undeposited funds and made it 11,000 account before you imported.
Okay. So if I already have transactions in that 1,400 account that I may want to reference, can I just edit that and change that number, that account with all of its previous activity, and just edit it to make it 11,000?
That's exactly what you would do. That's the same thing we did with the 12,000 account. It was 1,200. We just edit the account number and make it match what MaxxTraxx has, so that the next time I go to export, it will go into this account instead.
Can you close that door?
Okay.
So let me go and really quickly clean this up. So now that I've kind of fixed one account, you notice all of the accounts zeroed out because it was, one journal entry hit all of these accounts. So it basically took me back to square one. And I can delete these account numbers. You can always delete an account in Chart of Accounts as long as there are no transactions in them. Not if the account balance is 0, you can make it won't let you delete it if there's transactions, but you can make it inactive. The only way you can actually delete it is if there's no transactions in it at all. So we're back to square one. Before we did the import, we've only got 3 accounts this time set up. Well, actually 4. And 5, it did a 57,000. Oh, no, we did that yesterday. So we have 5 or 6 accounts set. What we're going to do is see what would happen if we go back, pretty much do the exact same thing under Accounting, Export to QuickBooks. We're going to select the rest of these from the list. This time we're going to export it as just one single transaction.
Okay.
So we select Export Selected Item, cancel from here, go back to QuickBooks. We're going to choose to File, Utilities, Import, IIF. Takes us back to where I was saying before. It's going to remember the window so you don't have to go search for it again. This time, from here, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the two, but I know that batch 3 was the first one I did. Batch 4 is the one we're doing now.
Okay, so we can also go by the time, 11:47 a.m. instead of 11:37 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If I wanted to view it before I imported it, I can open it with QuickBooks, Excel or Notepad. And as you'll see, this journal entry looks a little bit different than the first one we saw because it's not separated out by repair order number. It's just one big journal entry.
Gotcha. Okay.
Just lump sums in each account. But the same thing's going to happen here when I go to import it. It's going to create those accounts that I didn't already have or didn't have matched up. So it's still going to import it into QuickBooks, but then you'll have to obviously figure out what you're going to do. You're going to, if I had none and these were going to be my new numbers, then fine. We just go in and edit them, put the account number here, change the name to match whatever it's supposed to be called, because at this point I have no idea what this 13250 account is. 50,000, I know that that's cost of goods sold parts just by memory, but otherwise right now all we've done is imported a 50,000 account. That doesn't help, for your accounting on the side. So you'd still have some setups to change if you let this import make the accounts for you on purpose. You'd still have to have them make some sense. To cost of goods. So and if I left it that way, then the next time I go to import again, I'll go back to File, Imports, IIF, and we'll do that first one that I deleted. I'll bring it in again. And this time, it actually, it went to those accounts because they're already there. It just added, we have the first entry. Let me open up here. Yeah, we have the first entry that's here as one lump sum journal entry. And then the others actually came in on a per repair order.
How did you get that screen again? How did you get to that?
I just double, let me minimize here. I'm highlighted on this transaction. I just double clicked on it to edit it.
Okay. Okay.
So I can see what's in that journal entry or what else is tied to that. Because on this screen, all I'm seeing is 502. But if I double click, it shows the whole journal entry. 502 went to inventory, and then it gives me the rest of the breakdown.
Okay. Hey, is everybody on the call, are you guys real familiar with navigating that, looking at the transaction? This is all Greek to me. Is that pretty familiar for you guys? Are you a little feedback? Is this pretty standard? You've done all this kind of thing before?
I'm really hoping that MaxxTraxx is real similar to it, because that's what I've got to learn next.
Well, I think this is harder than MaxxTraxx. Maybe it's just because of my familiarity.
I understand.
Okay, any more feedback on that, guys? Are you guys pretty comfortable, this old hat for you? A lot of guys working in QuickBooks. You guys familiar with these kinds of transactions? Okay, guys, I just kind of getting a pulse of where everybody's at, if this is making sense.
Yeah, basically, if you've been using QuickBooks for a while, you know how to get around, do journal entries, things like that, and you've got your books already preset, all of this exporting, all it's doing is saving you the time of having to come in and either make that cash ticket or coming in and creating a manual journal entry to all those other accounts. It's just simply putting the journal entry in for you. So the setups is the most important part in the beginning so that it does import where you want it to import. But once it's set, then it's just literally a daily, I'm closing out my books at the end of the day, making sure my drawer is all counted and all of that's fine, and then I just choose to export and it drops it into QuickBooks so that I don't have to do the manual work. The setup takes a little bit of time, but once it's set, then it's just a one-click, export and import once a day. And that's the only downside, too, as well as far as using the QuickBooks is you can never go to your QuickBooks, so I can say never, but you can't go to your QuickBooks at any given time in the day and see what your updated accounting is as of right this second, because I haven't, say, closed out my books and imported for the day. Okay. So my QuickBooks are only as updated as my last import.
So a question that's actually came up a few times, is if you get credits. If you get credits from a vendor, how do we get those into, well, I guess we're not really tracking our inventory in QuickBooks at all, right? We're just tracking the total numbers.
Right, you're not tracking the actual inventory, just the entry of the increase and decrease of your inventory valuation account.
Okay, so really we would just be recording a credit. We would post the credit in MaxxTraxx, and that credit would come over into our APs as a credit into QuickBooks, right?
And that I would probably have to check on as well, because the last I saw was when you're exporting vendor invoices, it exports fine as long as it's an actual invoice. But when you go to export a credit, it bumps you an error because QuickBooks doesn't know how to handle a negative. You can't post in QuickBooks a negative invoice. In QuickBooks, it requires you to, under Enter Bill, it requires you to click this toggle button to tell it whether it's a bill or whether it's a credit.
Oh.
And exporting your vendor invoices is going to be trying to export a bill at a negative dollar amount, and QuickBooks won't let you. So it'll jump out an error when you go to do your export.
Okay. I've had a couple tech support questions on that, and
yeah, I've sent that one to Mark already, and I'm not sure where we are on it, but
okay, interesting. Okay.
So that would those would have to still be manually entered into your QuickBooks, your AP credits, because it doesn't export right now.
Okay.
Is there a list of those kind of things that we need to be careful with?
That one's really the only one that I know of as far as when people are exporting. You'll get 2 error message in the export if your export isn't going to work. It's either going to be out of balance. The journal entry is out of balance, which in MaxxTraxx you have the ability to go under your utilities and view any unbalanced transactions, which currently I don't have any, but if you had a journal entry that was out of balance for some reason, you would have to go and fix that and then re-export to QuickBooks because it won't export an out of balance journal entry at all. That, and also for existing QuickBooks users, the sales tax account is typically in QuickBooks already set and preset to a vendor that you make your sales tax payments to. And when you're importing from MaxxTraxx, it will give you an error because it will tell you that your journal entry doesn't have a vendor name attached to it. So our workaround has been to create a secondary sales tax payable account that is not, not the same as the one MaxxTraxx or QuickBooks is currently using. that doesn't require the vendor name attached and import into that account instead. The only difference between those is the sales tax payable account that QuickBooks creates for you is also tied to being able to go under vendors, sales tax, and pay sales tax. And it calculates how much that you're going to pay versus if I were to go to any, import my sales tax into a different account. I'm going to create a 23600 account, which is actually what MaxxTraxx did for me, but it's not looking at that balance when I go to say sales tax, pay sales tax. It doesn't see that because it's not tied to an entity. So I would have to manually I'd have to manually write my check to my sales tax, posting it to this account like old school journal entry style. You can't use the features in QuickBooks to pay sales tax.
Which is really what we do on MaxxTraxx.
Yep.
Just manually. Okay.
Just some people are kind of used to, they're just used to the way QuickBooks does stuff as far as payroll taxes, make a deposit with the drop down of the undeposited, when we go to banking in QuickBooks and we choose make a deposit, it looks at, it always looks at that 11,000 undeposited funds account, and it only looks at that account for you to tag to create your deposits in QuickBooks. So if I were to be importing my cash directly to the bank account or to another account, when I went under banking in QuickBooks to say make a deposit, they wouldn't show up on the list. It would be like a regular journal entry. So depending on, we've actually got that portion set, but the sales tax side of it is still another story where you're going to have to manually make that payment.
So
manually through write-a check.
Right. I do actually see a lot of similarities now between actually the way that we set up it in MaxxTraxx, and I know that was part of the goal, was try to do the integrated accounting in MaxxTraxx to be more familiar, more similar to the QuickBooks,
right.
So people had. Gotcha. Okay.
In writing the accounting in MaxxTraxx, it was kind of a mixture of the way MotorTrax handled the accounting and the way QuickBooks. So it's still kind of its own. It's not exactly, it doesn't work exactly the way QuickBooks works, but some of the features pretty much look the same. So, but it's always, unless you absolutely insist on using QuickBooks or have to use QuickBooks for another reason, my opinion, I would just nix QuickBooks and just leave it all here, because then you don't have to worry about imports, exports, journal entries, making sure anything is, it's already preset. And at any given time, anytime you close out an invoice, you immediately can go into your chart of accounts and they're updated. Your trial balance, your income statement, everything, and all your reports are updated on the fly, versus in QuickBooks, they're only as good as your last import.
Okay. So do most folks, anybody on the call, do you guys handle your accounts receivable on your QuickBooks side instead of your MaxxTraxx side? Anybody get that far yet with QuickBooks, using QuickBooks with MaxxTraxx? Maybe, maybe nobody's even doing that part yet. Because I've had people say, well, I manage my accounts receivable in MaxxTraxx, but I do all my payables, I do all my checking, I write all my checks in QuickBooks. So how does that work?
Well, as of right now, that's almost the only way to handle it, because as you're exporting your customers, your repair orders, all of your payments coming in, that's all being handled in MaxxTraxx anyway. All of that detail is in MaxxTraxx, and the only thing QuickBooks is getting is a journal entry. So although you've got a balance in receivables in QuickBooks, if you wanted to receive a payment from a customer in QuickBooks, it's not going to let you, because it doesn't have a customer, for one, in QuickBooks, and there's no transaction for you to say, I'm applying this payment to this customer. That all happens in the MaxxTraxx side only. All you're doing is updating your accounting, your chart of accounts. You're not really doing any of the front end in QuickBooks at all.
So like accounts payable, vendors are really in accounts payable, really. It's just a general journal entry. Okay. Okay. And can you show us what an income and expense statement would look like coming out of QuickBooks?
On the QuickBooks side, we would have up here under reports, go down to company and financial, and they call it a profit and loss. They have a bunch of different styles, but your standard income statement. And we'll say, oh, I don't know why it's telling me 2013. But for today, we have, oh, probably because
the top.
What was that? Oh, yeah. Change the date
yeah, I'm
at the
just
top.
wondering why usually it looks at your computer date, especially if I'm choosing today, but for some reason it thinks that I'm on.
Oh. One of the girls play with it?
Yeah. They've been in doing the books again. You know how it is. Can't keep them out.
Such talent they have.
Yes, because the entries that I imported, even though it says June 30th of 2010, let's see, income, June 30, 2010, my income statement is giving me nothing for June 30, 2010. That's not good.
I'll see it's saying again on the report 13. Well, it's actually giving us some numbers, though.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm trying to see where the newly created accounts are showing up on this income statement, and I don't see what they are.
5 digits, right.
These are still looking at the sample data that's in this program that I'm using, not the updated information that I just used.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's just kind of a quirky QuickBooks thing. I'm not sure what it's doing, or why it thinks I'm in the year 2013, but
Right.
But that, I mean, the profit and loss statement looks like this in QuickBooks as far as your income, cost of goods sold, and your expense accounts, giving you your net at the bottom. And on the MaxxTraxx side, it looks fairly similar. Financials, general ledger.
I could see now, Rhonda, though. I could see where, oh, you got the latest. You got that latest report, you lucky dog. I just saw you got that. I haven't gotten it yet. They don't give me anything because they don't want me to break it. So I could see now why an accountant would say, you know what, I just want to look at your QuickBooks income and expense statement. I just want your numbers in QuickBooks, because they do actually look fairly different. But I have gotten really good feedback.
It's much simplified, and if you're just having the accountant check on your stuff, that's all they need. But
You mean a MaxxTraxx or in the QuickBooks format?
QuickBooks. But if your accountant's part of his function, his or her function is to bore down deep into your stuff and find your shortcomings in your way of doing business and stuff like that, advise you on that, he's got to have the real stuff. He's got to have MaxxTraxx.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
If they,
I mean,
if your account,
typically,
if your accountant has
data entry to do.
Yeah, typically, if your accountant is one that's, your bookkeeper is one that's saying, I want your stuff in QuickBooks, it's more so because when you, rather than just printing this report and emailing it to your bookkeeper, who then has to manually put these numbers, which was what would happen with MaxxTraxx. You would print them a report, send it to them, and they would manually update their set of books to match your set of books, versus if you're both using QuickBooks, which is what they like, is you basically create that same export file. You know, you export, or you create an accountant's copy, and you send it to the accountant, and all they do is then import it to update the books. They don't have to do any work. That's why they like you to use the same software with them. And plus, the same with MaxxTraxx. We had a lot of bookkeepers and accountants out there that only knew QuickBooks and Peachtree and those other accounting systems, and then we were using MaxxTraxx, and they're like, I don't like your accounting system. I don't know how to use it. And they obviously you can't import transactions into it, you know, just for my end of the day. They would have to manually work to put those in, and so they would say, no, I don't want to do it. So it just depends on whether, if they're insisting or not. But because otherwise you can do the same thing in both. Print a report and say, here, I'm giving this to my bookkeeper, and it's up to you to update the numbers and come back with any journal entries that I need to make on my end and things like that.
Okay.
Ladies, I
With
have to
that,
go.
Thanks for being on with us. Yeah, I've got a few more questions. I'm gonna sit tight. So if you guys have, do we have any more questions? We've had a good group, quiet group, of course, always commandeering the conversation. Anybody have questions kind of what's going on here. So Rhonda, you know what's kind of interesting to me, that now that I've kind of seen the whole process, you know, I'm kind of back to, gosh, I would keep it in Max, really. Because
yeah, if I have the option, I would always use MaxxTraxx.
Okay.
So it's any new setup would be use MaxxTraxx. It's got it there. It's already set for you. You know, leave it as is. But we have this option if you insist on using QuickBooks.
Right.
If for some reason that, you know, you're just an avid QuickBooks user, then we just kind of give you this little help out so that you can lessen the load. But you still have to then manually do all of your updating in QuickBooks, totally separate.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, if you have any questions, Ron, I had your speakers muted just because I had a little bit of background noise, but I've just unmuted you. Did you have any questions,
cool.
Ron?
Not really, because I've been using QuickBooks for about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
No, 4 or 5 years, and it works okay, but my problem is I was always doubling up my work because I had to manually put all my stuff into QuickBooks, and that's why I kind of went with MaxxTraxx, because it has an integrated software package for accounting.
Right.
And that's, as Rhonda was saying, what I'm looking at is that I want to get away from some work. And if we're using the software at the shop, then it's going to go right into the bookkeeping, and I won't have to do that anymore.
Okay.
And I honestly don't see, you know, if people are using the MaxxTraxx bookkeeping, why they would want to. I mean, it seems like a lot of extra work to import.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel that way too, but since you've been manually doing it, Ron, what do you think about using this export feature on a daily basis to get your numbers in there? Or would you just say, you know, why would I do that? Just do it in Max.
It looks like a good idea. It really does. I mean, if you want to continue to use the QuickBooks, and if you've got it all set up and get everything matched up, it would be great, I think. You know, I mean, it looks to be a nice way to do it, but there again, I think like it doesn't import like your payroll.
Right.
So you're going to actually be working out of 2 different. If you wanted to do your payroll in MaxxTraxx, which, you know, if you're going to use the time clock and everything, it just seems like you're doing 2 separate accounting programs again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a good one, because with if you're using the QuickBooks, you still have to go to MaxxTraxx, print out your time cards, print out your productivity reports, figure out who's making what, and then manually enter all of that into QuickBooks. Versus if you use MaxxTraxx accounting, when you go into payroll, it's already there. It sees the time card already there. It's already pre-calculated based on sales, you know, any commissions. It's there for you. Tax tables and everything. You don't, no manual entries outside of, you know, a bonus here or there.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I guess the point that I guess I'm trying to make is that, you know, when I computerized my shop, it was supposed to make less work,
Right.
as opposed to making more work.
Right.
And what I was doing now, I mean, I've been we bought the original program that I'm trying to get away from now in '99, and it just I've always had to do just all this extra work because I had 2 separate programs, and that's one of the reasons when I looked at MaxxTraxx that it was very attractive to me for the accounting package. And I've been to my bookkeepers and I'd say, this is what I'm doing. Is this going to work with us? And they have no problem with it. So,
yeah, I've heard the same thing, Ron. In fact, I was demoing a shop in Florida and talking to the guy, and he says, well, I really want to use QuickBooks with MaxxTraxx. I said, yeah, I hear this all the time, that accountants, they're saying, look, if you want to use me, you got to use QuickBooks because that's all I know how to do, and I'm not going to learn your program. So this guy pipes up on the conference call. He says, "Hey, I'm Vic, and by the way, I'm the accountant, and I'm the one who told him to look at MaxxTraxx." And I'm like, "Oh boy, foot in mouth." But, you know, he did say, though, I have to say, this is actually a very, very clean income and expense statement. And I just realized, Rhonda, that's probably the key, what you just said. You can actually go into QuickBooks, say, send to accountant, and they only have to track their clients in one database with one format to look at. So now it's kind of making sense to me why so many accountants are saying, look, I'll do your accounting, but you got to send it to me in QuickBooks. But now that you've actually gone through step by step and shown us how it's done, what gets sent over, what frankly doesn't get sent over, you know, it's still making sense to me that you still really want to do it in CE. And it might have been because so many of our competitors, really all of the big competitors, you know, RO Ryder, Mitchell, they don't have accounting, so they have to export to QuickBooks. Right. So that's, and I guess back when we had just the SE version, the old version that we don't even sell anymore, we didn't have the accounting done either, so kind of as a stopgap. That's probably why they came up with the export to QuickBooks just until we got our accounting done, which took 4 years to write because it's kind of, well, it's pretty sophisticated. So that's, yeah, I've learned a lot. It's been very interesting. You know, I hope everybody on the call has kind of been able to get their questions answered. And it may be, you know, if nobody's really into it yet, you might need to actually experiment a little bit to learn more about this and see what you know and what you don't know. Sometimes you have to use it to understand what even, you know, what questions to ask. But it's been good. It's been valuable, Rhonda. I really, really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time.
Rhonda?
Yes.
In one of the new updates, they were going to allow for kind of like a custom GL. Could you, in that update, the way you understand it, could you mirror what QuickBooks is doing if your accountant just really was struggling and that's what they wanted? Could you use that new feature to create basically a custom GL that mirrored the QuickBooks?
That I don't know. I don't know yet how they plan on setting that up. Right now, it would be the same thing we were doing, but the other direction, as far as, you know, QuickBooks is using, you know, 1,500 to track my truck, or whatever this, you know, 23,600 is my taxes in MaxxTraxx, but in QuickBooks it uses 23. I'd have to then manually go into my MaxxTraxx and not only change my default account postings, but I would have to, or we'll use the accounts receivable. In MaxxTraxx, I cannot edit these accounts. They're already done. You've made them. They're done. So I would have to go in and create a 1,200 account for accounts receivable. I'd have to create all of the accounts that I'm needing to use from QuickBooks because most of them don't exist and they don't let you edit the account numbers to simply, that's why it's easier to edit your QuickBooks stuff. Because you can edit those numbers all day long.
Got it.
So we can't actually, never even ask this. A great question, Walter. I never even wondered that. Could we go to our chart of accounts and just change it from 1,200 to, or 12,000 to 1,200?
And you can't. You can't on the MaxxTraxx side pretty much edit any of these. You would have to, say, add a new one.
Okay. Okay. And I've actually seen that, and you'll see that in about an hour and 45 minutes, because Sergio's system actually, he has, his chart of accounts has a bunch of 4-digit numbers with an A at the end of it. And that's because years ago, before he bought that shop, he's in MotorTraxx, he was actually having to print out reports that matched QuickBooks numbers. So Walter, he was actually trying to accomplish the same thing, really, just kind of in a different way. And of course, his numbers are all jumbled anyway. We need to start out fresh, which we're going to do today. But
I was more thinking, I was more thinking if the, the QuickBooks boils it down to 12 lines, and could we take our 25 lines that are on our income and expense that we would do at the end of the day and boil it down to the same 6 or 7 lines so that it kind of looked the same and felt the same for the accountant was kind of what I was heading towards.
Only gross profit. That report that you're talking about is only gross profit that they just wrote and we haven't had released out in this latest update. So Rhonda, how about all of our expense accounts? So if I've got, you know, all my rent, my insurance, my advertising, my financial sales discount, financial warranty, does that all come over into QuickBooks?
Some of the expense accounts, the ones that are tied to maybe like a return check expense or the finance accounts like you were saying, but your rent, you're not writing your rent checks out of MaxxTraxx, so there is no, there's no exporting of that information. You're not basically doing, it would make no sense for you to run your entire business in MaxxTraxx and then export to QuickBooks. So
Gotcha.
QuickBooks, only QuickBooks is handling all of your check writing, all of your payroll, all of your accounts payable, paying bills, all of your reports, and all you're doing is pulling a journal entry from MaxxTraxx to update your sales and cost of goods sold, sales tax.
So your gross
really
profit stuff, everything above the line, everything gross profit gets exported, and everything net profit expense-wise, 60,000 account-wise is all handled out of QuickBooks. But again, that still begs the question of accounts payable, because it is going to bring over my 12,000 and my 20,000 account, right?
Well, what it will bring over in payables are just your restock vendor invoices, because you wouldn't typically be putting anything else into MaxxTraxx.
Gotcha.
You wouldn't be putting your rent expenses or your lights and gas or anything, only your parts that you're stocking. So it's going to import those accounts payable, but then you still have to manually update the rest of your bills in QuickBooks.
So do you, when those restock parts tickets come across, that's right, we didn't have any of those in example. When the restock parts ticket comes across, does it go into a vendor account in QuickBooks?
It just updates the 20,000 account. There's no vendor name information. There's no like list of vendors, just like there's no list of customers in QuickBooks.
Interesting. So we would actually just be paying, writing a check to Napa and posting it to the 20,000 account, right?
Right, right. There would be no Napa vendor with an updated list of invoices to pay on the QuickBooks side. It's just a journal entry.
Okay, perfect. Boy, that finished out the picture for me. Great. Okay. Any other questions? This is fabulous, Rhonda. I just cannot thank you enough. And, you know, guys, thanks for being on the call. This is, you know, I think we're all kind of learning different avenues on how to do the accounting. My guess is that most people on the call aren't really doing the full accounting right now in CE. Just so you know, I'm publishing the webinar schedule later on this afternoon for July and August. We are going to be doing CE-related webinars in July, except for the last week of July I'm taking off. And then all of August is going to be that 4-part webinar series for MotorTraxx to MaxxTraxx Pro CE users, trying to get the rest of our lagging MotorTraxx users merged over to the Windows version. So that's what we're going to be doing in the month of August. So we're not going to have any CE-related webinars. However, I still think there may be some information to be gleaned if you are on MaxxTraxx and you used to be on MotorTraxx. Plus, we're going to do a special 2-hour webinar in September that is going to be directly focusing on setting up your general ledger in CE. And for a lot of people, if they didn't get their beginning balances set up from the get-go, Derek, I mean, you're my muse on this one. We are going to use Derek's company actually as our trial, or our dry run for that webinar, and we're going to be going through line by line on the general ledger. Okay, so 10,000 account, what is it? How does that number get put in there originally? You know, how do you even come up with that number, and how is it used on a day-to-day basis? We're going to do that for pretty much all the way 10,000 through 30,000 accounts, and then of course 40,000 through 60,000 are just your income, cost of goods, and expenses. Those are pretty straightforward. But setting up the 10,000, 20,000, and 30,000 accounts, which is what appears on your balance sheet, which is not automatically generated, that's all, you know, you have to put that in there to begin with. I think once you get that set up correctly for the very first time in MaxxTraxx Pro CE, then going forward, it's a piece of cake. But that's kind of a challenge. You know, Rhonda and I are going to be working with a shop later on this afternoon who's been using MaxxTraxx and has a completely hamburger general ledger just from years of abuse because things are so difficult to make adjustments to in our old DOS version. So we are going to start with a clean slate, and you know, luckily he's got the benefit of both of us helping him out, saying, okay, drawing the line in the sand, July 1st, which for him is his fiscal year, July 1st going forward, we're going to start with all these beginning balance numbers. Now in his case, it's going to be an evolutionary process. He doesn't actually have all of his assets figured out, you know, all of his vehicles, all his depreciation. That's all something that's going to be coming along from his accountant in the next couple of weeks. No big deal. We're just going to backdate all of those beginning general ledger balances as of 6/30, you know, for the asset accounts. And same thing for the liabilities. He's got a couple of loans. He's got a couple of, you know, payables for equipment. So we're going to be setting up those liabilities accounts, again, with what the balance was as of 6/30. And, yeah, we're not going to do it this week. We don't have time. We're going to do it next week. But it's going to be an evolutionary process for us to be creating that balance sheet. And what I tell most people is if you're setting up your general ledger from scratch and you don't have a clean balance sheet, it's about a 2-month process. Would you agree, Rhonda? You know,
I would say so before it finally gets to the T and yeah, it takes a little bit.
You know, and what I always call the great equalizer is your bank account reconciliation, because I think what happens is that people are writing, we're writing checks, and then those checks aren't in our bank account reconciliation, and then we realize, oh, well, that's a check to the U.S. Treasury. Oh, that's for our, you know, federal income tax withholding, so we need to put in an entry for that. Oops, beginning balance. Right. 6/30/2010. So hopefully if you guys, obviously if you've been on this call, you're interested in getting your financials up to date. So if you guys are interested in that, that's going to be in September. It's going to be a 2-hour one, a little bit of a marathon. But we're definitely going to be sending out some paperwork ahead of time. So you guys are going to have a really good idea of the format and be able to take notes and that kind of thing. So, well, guys, thank you so much for participating today. Rhonda, again, thank you.
You're welcome.
And if you guys have any follow-up questions after this, we're going to be sending an email. Send it our way, and we'll answer that back if you have any questions. Okay. Until next time, guys, have a good one.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.